Welcome to Insectech's Ethical Hacking course videos, module cross-site scripting. In the previous video, we have seen what is cross-site scripting and what are the types of cross-site scripting and why this problem is occurring in web applications and how to mitigate cross-site scripting. In this video, we'll look at introduction to iframes and performing phishing attacks with iframe injection on cross-site scripting vulnerable web applications, and we'll try to understand the browser exploitation framework BEEF, and we'll try to understand the configuration, and finally we'll have couple of demonstrations of how we can exploit remote browsers using BEEF framework. So first, let us try to understand what are these iframes. Iframe is a tag in HTML used to embed frames into our web pages. It can be used to load other websites into our web pages. A very good example is Google Maps, and very dangerous from security perspective. We'll see why it is. It's because an attacker can spread malwares using these iframes. We can also perform phishing attacks using these iframes. So let us try to understand how we can perform a phishing attack using these iframes. So before actually starting that, I'd like to show what is an iframe. So let me quickly open a notepad file and let me write a simple iframe code. Width equals to 1000 and height equals to 1000. So this is a simple iframe code. I'm just saving it as something.html since it's a HTML code. And let me save it as iframe.html. So I'm just saving it in on my desktop. Just let me give you a double click. Now if you see, my site will be opened within an iframe. See, you can clearly see my site, which is on localhost, has been opened within an iframe, and the iframe's width is 1000 and height is also 1000 as I specified. If you change it to 100 and this also to 100, I'm just saving it and let me refresh this page again. See, the height and width have been reduced. So this is how an iframe looks like. Now let us try to understand how an attacker can use this iframe to attack other users. Now I have a simple website on my local host which I have developed. Now on this home page itself, it is having a search field. Now let us try to assume that this particular scenario is from an attacker's perspective. Now what an attacker will try to do is, he will first try to search whether it is vulnerable to cross-site scripting or not. So let me go back to my notepad and let me try to write a simple script. Alert access. So I'm just gonna execute this script in this search box to see whether this site is vulnerable to cross-site scripting or not. Awesome, it is showing an alert box with the name XSS. Since it is executing some external scripts, this site is vulnerable to cross-site scripting. Now I'm just copying the URL, pasting it in my notepad, and now I am modifying this URL with something like this: iframe source equals to http localhost /site. Now I'm just going to execute this script in the same browser. So if you observe, it is opening an iframe in this particular site. Now what an attacker will try to do is, he will try to load some phishing page onto this website, and he will try to give that particular URL to an innocent victim who thinks that this is the original website, and he will enter his credentials into that iframe, and the credentials will be sent to the attacker who has hosted that phishing page. Now let us try to execute the same, and let us try to see how it is. Now I have a simple script. I have already prepared a simple phishing page. With iframe, and that is form.html. I'm just opening the code of it. This particular form will contain a username field and a password field, and upon submitting this particular form, it will execute mail.php, which is in the same directory. And this mail.php, what it does is, it is actually taking the input that is actually being entered into that form which we have just seen. Now it is actually taking that input and the credentials that are being entered into that input fields, which are username and password, and it is writing it into log.txt. So this is what this mail.php is doing. So what an attacker will try to do now is, since this particular form is hosted on my local host, he will try to execute this particular form onto that vulnerable application. So let me open my notepad. iframe src source equals to http localhost iframe form.html, width equals to 200 and height equals to 200. Now I, being an attacker, I'm just going to execute this script in this search field. Awesome, it is now displaying a simple form, and it is asking, please log in here to experience the special features of our site. Since this particular form is very similar to this particular site, so the victim will easily believe that this particular iframe is hosted by this same server, same application. So what he will do is, he will just enter his credentials into this particular form. Now an attacker will try to copy this URL. Now an attacker somehow manages to send this link to the victim. Now as this particular link is containing localhost site search.php, and he will feel that this particular site is legitimate site, and he will try to execute this particular link in his browser. Since this site is having this form, and an attacker will try to perform some social engineering attack, and he will try to convince the victim to enter his credentials into this particular form. So I'm just going to enter my credentials as victim and victim. Now I being victim, I'm just clicking on the submit button, and it is showing some error message. Now what an attacker will do is, I'm just going back to attacker's website. So he will try to open his log file where he has logged these credentials of the victim. So this is how an attacker can inject iframes into cross-site scripting vulnerable websites, and he can send them to the victims, and he can do some kind of phishing attacks. And this is why iframes are very dangerous from a security. Let us now try to understand Beef. Beef is a browser exploitation framework. It's a great tool for browser exploitation. It has a couple of modules to perform various operations after gaining access to the victim's browser. Now let us try to understand how Beef works. An attacker first will set up a Beef server, and then he will host some malicious scripts on the Beef server. Upon hosting these malicious scripts, attacker tries to send a link to the victim. Victim will click on this link, and automatically the victim's browser will be hooked to the server. And this is how Beef works. Let's quickly see a demonstration of how we can attack browsers with Beef. And before that, let us try to understand how we have to configure this Beef. I'm just quickly opening my Backtrack instance. In this applications, Backtrack, exploitation tools, web exploitation tools, social engineering tools, in this Beef accesses, in this Beef. Now it will start Beef server. Before that, now I'm going to open my browser to open Beef's interface. To open that, IP address of a server, in my case it is localhost 10.0.2.15 and /beef. It will open an interface to configure our Beef. Here we need to enter Beef configuration password. By default, Beef configuration's password is beef config pass, which is already given here. In my case, I have changed it to some other password, and I am entering it, and just click on this apply config. The moment you click on it, it will display a message, Beef successfully configured and finished. So you just click on this finish your server will be ready. Now configuration part is over. Now let's quickly try to understand how we can attack remote browsers using this beef. Here we have an option, a message saying zombies. Zombies are the victims that are connected to our beef server. So if we attack any browser and if any system comes back to this beef server, the system's details will be displayed here in this place. Now to attack the victim, we have help here. In this we have example usage. You just click on this example usage, it will give you a link. We have to click on this link to connect to the beef server. So I'm just going to give this particular link to my victim, which is Windows 7. So this is my victim. I'm just opening my notepad. An attacker will somehow sends this particular link to the victim, HTTP beef server, and my IP address here is 56.101. Since we can even run it, so I'm just going to give that IP address to my victim, IP address along with the link, HTTP 192.168.56.101 slash beef hook example.php, beef slash hook slash example.php. So now an attacker will somehow try to send this particular link to the victim, and if victim browses this link, he will automatically be connected to the server. So I'm just browsing it, and now you can see the message. Beef test page. Now if we go back to our backtrack instance, see, one zombie is connected with the IP address 192.168.56.102, and similarly if you go to the option zombies, it is also showing the same message. And if you clearly observe, it is also showing the type of operating system of the victim, which is of Windows, and the browser he is using, it's Internet Explorer icon. And to see the version and all, you have the information here. This is using Internet Explorer 8.0, and which is of operating system type Windows NT. Now let us try to select this zombie and let us try to perform some operations on the victim's browser. I'm just going to show an alert message to the victim. Just click on send now. If you go to the Windows box, awesome, it is displaying you are hacked, the same message which we have executed in beef server. Similarly, we have many other options. The zombie is here, and let us try to execute some web page. Has been hacked. Just click on send now, and you just go to attack victim's machine, and the web page is showing this website has been hacked. And this is how we can exploit the browsers using Beef server, Beef framework. In this we have couple of other options. We can go through them and we can explore the options we have. We can even get the complete access to the remote system using couple of exploit modules we have, and this is how we can use Beef server, Beef browser exploitation framework to control, to exploit browser based vulnerabilities. So let me quickly go back to my presentation. Demo is over with browser exploitation with Beef.